Here I was, standing beside this milkman, my thoughts easily to become terrified, not helped either by the dead cat's head I was holding in my hands. All through our exchange, I made no reference to this head, nor did I look at it. He too appeared not to look at it. I knew, though, that he was well aware of what it was. Probably had got the detail of my picking it up, of walking back, walking forth, all that dithering around beforehand. I was sure, too, he'd have clocked my rolling it in the hankies, lifting it, perhaps also mind-reading my intention to carry it up to the usual place. Just as I was saying nothing about it, though, he was also saying nothing, as if it were inconsequential to be standing where nobody ever stood at 9:45 of a summer's night beside a teenage girl holding a decapitated head while chatting to her about taking the life of the boyfriend she was maybe involved with. That is an extract from Milkman by Anna Burns, which won the Booker Prize in 2018. So welcome everyone to Book In. I'm Rupert Fordham, and we are today continuing with the third of our series in recent Booker Prize winners. And this book, although written in 2018, is set in the Troubles in Northern Ireland during the 1970s, the late 1970s. And the central character is an 18-year-old girl, and we see the entire story through her eyes. In fact, the whole book is told, it's not quite stream of consciousness, but it's told in her voice, with her relating her thoughts in a kind of, at times, a torrent, a sort of rush of consciousness. And it's through this that we begin to understand what's going on, the extraordinary claustrophobia and terror of what it was like to live in a Catholic area in Belfast at that time. She's not named, no one is named in this film, in this book. The city in which
it's taken... It would be a great film, Ruth.
It would be a great film, wouldn't it? The city in which it's set is not named. None of the characters are given conventional names, that they are given labels by which we understand who they are. But it's an extraordinary way of telling the story, and in ways that Charlie, I know you're going to help us understand. It takes us right into what it would have been like to have been there as a young girl at that time with all that violence around you. So, Charlie, having made that introduction and read that particular passage, what I'm going to hand over to you to try and take this forward and explain to us what's going on.
Thank you, and probably just worth mentioning as well that the he in that extract is the milkman of the title, the eponymous milkman, who is an IRA leader.
Who is not a milkman, we should say.
He's not a milkman. Bizarrely, given what you said about names, turns out to be his name, Milkman.
Yes.
And that does make the novel seem as though it's going to be psychologically dark, a novel about the oppressive terror of the Troubles. But as Rue, I'm at least going to say, I think it rises above those traumas, political and personal. It's not so much about predatory males, it's more a joyous and transcendent celebration of individuality and courage. Rue, this is Anna Burns' third novel. It is her first novel since 2007. So basically she had a sort of 10-year hiatus. And it's the first time a Northern Irish writer has been awarded the Booker Prize. And there have been many dark and disturbing Irish novels about the Troubles, about Irish politics. And humour tends to be an essential aspect of those.
Yes, it is funny, isn't it? It's there's black humour and there's just wit. We'll come to quite a lot of that going forward. But she was brought up in Belfast around this time, so a lot of this is based on her own personal experience, isn't it?
Absolutely, and based on her childhood in Belfast during the Troubles, and the narrator's a similar age to Burns. And Burns is a Catholic, one of 7 children, so also a huge family like the narrators. And the geography of the book is similar to Ardoyne, the area Burns grew up in.
Yeah. But do we know if any of her family were involved in the IRA?
That's a very good question. I don't.
It's a slightly irrelevant question because, they may or may not have been, but she would have known plenty of others who were.
For sure, but interesting to know. I don't know the answer to that, Rue. It's set in 1979, and the narrator says she's writing 20 years later. So it is set just after the Good Friday Agreement, as in the writing of it, when the narrator is narrating it, just after the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. Burns wrote it in 2014, but by the time it was published in 2018, post-Brexit Northern Ireland power sharing arrangements are right back in the news, at the heart of the political agenda, which is something that the Booker Prizes commented on.
Yes, although hopefully not with the same levels of violence that existed in
here's
in
hoping.
those days.
Yeah, it's a rumbles, doesn't it? But here's hoping, and that that seems to still be the case for sure.
Yeah.
So Burns has stated that the setting is a distorted version of Belfast, but she then said it could also be any sort of totalitarian closed society existing in similarly oppressive conditions. And I think that's interesting because it both is and isn't, a particular place, I think.
I'm saying I find it very hard to read this and think of it's anywhere else other than Belfast.
Or Derry or some London Derry.
Or Derry.
One of those
Derry
places.
Possibly. But it has that feeling of certainly not New York, is it?
I'm sure so. Interestingly, in 2018, Faber were really pushing because they published another female Northern Irish author, Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney was longlisted with considerable publicity, but Burns, unheralded, slipped through and stole the prize. And it's had big sales. Unlike some Booker winners, it's been commercially as well as critically successful.
Which is amazing because it's not, as we'll come to, it's not necessarily an easy read.
It's not an easy read.
But it's very compelling. It's very compelling. So once you're into it, you're into it.
I think once you immerse yourself in the narrative voice, you can sort of run with it. It would be my experience. Interested to know what you think, Ray.
So, Charlie, you guys try and run through the plot because it's not a linear plot, is it? Things emerge.
Things emerge. So there's a narrator. It's an unnamed city, as we've said. It's in a Catholic area. And there's this man, Milkman, who is a seemingly high-ranking paramilitary officer. And he appears by the narrator's side at random, but clearly meticulously planned moments, knowing minute details of her life.
And we should say that he is, we're told he's 41 years old and she is 18 years old. Yeah. So he's a much older man.
He's a predatory male. Yeah. And he's orchestrating a kind of power grab, a kind of takeover of her life. She knows all about her boyfriend, who she calls her maybe boyfriend, and makes veiled threats that he might be, as in the boyfriend might be, victim of a car bombing if and it isn't stated but implied, she doesn't acquiesce with what he wants. In particular, he wants her to get in his car. And rumors spread locally as a result of a couple of meetings that she's having an affair with the milkman, and this causes her to be shunned by her mother and the entire wider community of which she's a part.
Which is very unfair because she's not having an affair with him.
She's not.
Yeah.
Far from it. She, by contrast, is in a relationship with her maybe boyfriend and has been for a year, but she is struggling to commit. He, the maybe boyfriend, has won a car, and it's got in fact, he hasn't won a car, he's won a car engine part.
This was a bit odd, wasn't it? Because again, he's got this bit of a car, which is, I think, is a classic Bentley. Is that right?
Yeah, classic Bentley. Yeah,
and he loves cars, so his house is full of bits of cars. That's what he likes to do.
And all the boys love cars.
Yeah, they all tinker with cars, and anyway, something. Is it a lottery at his work or something?
It's a lottery at his work, and he wins a supercharger, whatever that is, which is part of a car someone else had, and they've clearly broken it up for a lottery at work. But one of the other parts, not the part maybe boyfriend's one, but one of the other parts must have had the flag, as in the Union Jack, on it, because these cars do. And so by a perverse, nonsensical association, he begins to be marginalised as a suspected informer. So just to clarify that, he's won the supercharger. other people have won other parts of the car in a work lottery. Because someone else's part has the British flag on, he is tainted by association.
Yeah, bonkers.
It is one of so many dystopian kind of
Yeah.
aspects of the community that Anna Burns is describing.
But what she does so well, people start talking about it. Oh, have you heard? He got this car. You know, it had a Union Jack on it. Although, of course, the phrase Union Jack is never mentioned. It's just the flag from that country across the water. They call
across
it, don't
the
they?
Water, yeah.
We'll come to all
One
that
of about
anyway.
4 places in the book.
Yes.
The place across the water. She becomes more isolated and withdrawn. She drifts apart from maybe boyfriend, and people, including her, and this is another name, longest friend from primary school, suggest her behaviour, particularly reading while walking, which is something she does, has led her to become a pariah and thus kind of enabled all these rumours.
I think you just have to clarify reading while walking, because it's quite important, and it kind of defines her early on, doesn't it? So what does she do?
Well, it is as it says on the tin. She just walks about the street with her head in a book, not looking where she's going, and reading quite high-level English, mostly English literature masterpieces as she goes.
Oh, she does quite a lot of books that we might talk about.
Booking classics, right?
Booking classics.
Yeah.
On the streets of Belfast, age 18.
Yeah, all English literature, bar. But
Yeah.
you pointed out to me earlier, I think, one Irish one.
J.M. Synge.
But mostly, you know, not obviously Irish literature for sure. And so longest friend meets her, and whilst they're having that meeting, the narrator is poisoned by Tablets Girl. So just that's another name. Bear with us, rate the names. We'll come to those. And Tablets Girl is a mentally ill local woman. The narrator nearly dies, but she recovers. And soon after, Tablets Girl is found murdered, and the community all assume that Milkman has killed Tablets Girl as revenge for harming the narrator. And of course, this then further sours the narrator's reputation within her community. So It's gone down, it's got worse, and it's getting really bad.
Yes.
The girl and maybe boyfriend break up over a tense phone call, and the girl goes round his house, this is the narrator, to reconcile, but walks in, alas, on a gay love scene, discovering that maybe boyfriend is really in love with her best friend known as the chef.
Sorry, his best friend, Charlie, not her best friend.
Did I say the wrong thing? So confusing, yes, indeed. I'm getting lost in my plot summary. His best friend, known as the chef, and this catapults her into resigning herself to her fate. And she finally accepts a ride from Milkman. And Milkman announces...
Who yet again turns up, doesn't he?
He turns up...
Get in my car.
Spookily at that moment. Clearly been following everything that's going on. He announces they'll go on a date the next evening. But the next day, before the date can happen, the Milkman is shot and killed by the one significant appearance in the whole text of the British security forces. And the narrator's then ambushed in the toilets of a club by another local absolute creep called Somebody McSomebody, who's been threatening to stalk her all along and now threatens to kill her. And she's saved by the other women in the toilets who beat him up. That's beat Somebody McSomebody up. That's another name, by the way. With her stalkers no longer troubling her, the narrator's life returns to a state of normality.
Yeah. So, a normal few months in the life of a Catholic community in Belfast in the late 1970s.
So as promised, Roo, we'd better start with the names.
Yes.
So there's this delightful nomenclature. So maybe boyfriend we've talked about. First and third brother-in-law get a lot of talked about in this. We sisters, longest friend.
So we sisters. Sorry, Charlie, to interrupt. We sisters. That's we as in Scottish small, little sisters.
Yeah.
There are, I think there's 2 of them, possibly 3. I think there's only 2 of them.
3. There's 7, 8,
There are
and
3 of them. There are 3 of them, okay. But they're kind of one unit. They arrive together, they talk together.
They're geniuses as one.
Yes, exactly. They're absolutely wonderful.
They are lots of fun, indeed. There's Beyond the Pales, who are, a group of people we'll come to. Renouncers, who are basically frequently mentioned. Those are renouncers of the state. Therefore, that's the name for sort of IRA terrorists, or at least freedom fighters, depending on your perspective, Roo. The international couple, who are maybe maybe boyfriends, truant parents who have gone off ballroom dancing around the world, the pious women who engage in en masse groupthink and speak about all social issues, and who later en masse decide they want to flirt with a character called the real Milkman, who then become the ex-pious.
They turn out to be not quite so pious, don't they?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So at some point, somebody McSomebody, Milkman, and Tablets Girl's sister, that's 3 different characters, are each described by the narrator as using my, as in the narrator's, name, my first name, my full name. And we're not told what it is. But in these instances, the silence about her name seems a sort of hiding of the self, perhaps a kind of necessary concealment, perhaps an act of self-protection of somebody who lives in fear. And generally, it is a world renamed. So Tablets Girl, Nuclear Boy, and when real names are cited, like Tablets Girl's real name, which comes in later in the novel, it's a very odd name indeed, and it seems out of place. And naming is also a political act. And interestingly, I recently listened, Rue, to an episode of The Rest is History set in Dublin, and they had an Irish professor in there as a guest. And he got upset when they referred to it as Londonderry. And that's a sort of reminder of how naming in Northern Ireland really is an act of identity, of political determination. And even the name Kitty for Catherine O'Shea is problematic. And it's tied to language as well, the imposition of English over Gaelic names.
But there's a kind of list of acceptable names, isn't there?
Yes, that's right.
And we're told what names aren't acceptable, which is a sort of absurd list of posh English names, basically.
Indeed. And
one of which is Rupert.
Is it? I missed that. I bet. Well done. Congratulations. And this is a list proscribed by the renouncer community by someone called Jason. So Jason makes this list, and Jason turns out to be one of the pious women who is called Jason. It's not their real name, I guess, because Jason is a kind of typical English name. There are 2 religions, which are right religion and wrong religion, neither ever named. And there are 4 main places. So you mentioned the place over the water, aka us in England. There's also this side of the road, which is where the community of the narrator is, over the road, which by implication is the Protestant community, over the border, which is Southern Ireland, or, and as said, over the water. There's also a few places sort of within the unnamed city. There's a place called the 10-minute area, and there's another place called the usual place, which is what the narrator's been walking through in that opening extract.
I'm assuming the 10-minute area is the kind of the no-go area.
It's a no-go area, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's some of the kind of, I suppose, almost comic nightmarishness of the narrator carrying a cat's head in that episode, which she wrote at the start. It's a no-go area. She finds this, basically a bomb's gone off and the only remnant is a dead cat's head.
Yes,
she picks it up rather tenderly and sadly.
Ironically, the bomb that goes off is an old Second World War Nazi bomb, isn't it?
Nothing happens as it should, especially for the renouncers who are just rubbish at their job of being terrorists.
And the usual place, also a name, is a cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the style has these cadences, kind of liquid rhythms almost. Hiberno English colloquialisms, which is kind of Irishisms, and we, so it's Scottish, but that's also Northern Irish, as in the We Sisters, Beyond the Pale. And then there's this sort of what's technically called syntax inversion, which is just the word order in sentences is placed to emphasize the sort of Irishisms which are evoked through the style and through the prose.
So, though never will I tell you is an example, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's almost like sort of courtly medieval address. It's quite strange.
It's got sort of super politeness,
yes.
Which often that's often dialects do because they sound more archaic, more formal, delightfully often. And the renamings, as said, are part of a loss of identity, and that's national as well as personal, because the renouncers, as in the the IRA, have removed the names of the streets to confuse infiltrators. And so, by implication, kind of the names of people have been removed. In a totalitarian state, identity gets confused and lost. So maybe we should rename her for the podcast, Rue, and I'm going to call her the maybe heroine from this point on.
Okay, although she's called third sister, isn't she? Whenever she's called
middle
anything.
sister.
Middle sister.
Yeah,
okay.
I think she'd be technically fifth. I'm thinking she's got 4 brothers, 3 wee sisters, so I'm going 5th out of 8. But we'll call her middle sister if you want.
Yeah, okay. And we'll talk about her family later on, won't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Get to her family, yeah.
So although we would think of a book set in Belfast in this period, we think it would be about the differences between the various communities. One of the central themes actually is stalking, isn't it?
Yeah. So surprisingly, given what you said, though, about the setting and about the fact that this is a novel about stalking, there's not much violence in the novel. There's one seemingly undescribed incident, which is between the chef, whose maybe boyfriend's male lover, and maybe boyfriend and a gang of some sort. There's the dead cat. There's various recorded deaths and assassinations that we don't experience firsthand, in particular the death of Milkman and the shooting of another character called Real Milkman. There's the poisoning of the narrator of the maybe heroine, middle sister, and that's a violence of sort. But the only really violent incident is that the beating up of somebody McSomebody, which is carried out by a group of women on a dangerous scumbag who'd already hit the narrator and who intends to take over the milkman's role as her chief stalker. So the evil, to come back to your question about stalking, it comes from the predatory stalking males, particularly the milkman, of course, himself. And he has a sense of threat, a sort of unspoken power of being an undesirable. And the nuts and bolts of the experience of being stalked, which the narrator, the maybe heroine, experiences, are meticulously recorded. Rue, I'm going to ask you, since you did such a good job with the opening passage, if you're happy to read a passage that begins, "That was the way it worked."
Yes. So this is basically how she felt about being stalked. That was the way it worked. Hard to define, this stalking, this predation, because it was piecemeal, a bit here, a bit there, maybe not, perhaps, don't know. It was constant hints, symbolisms, representations, metaphors. He could have meant what I thought he'd meant, but equally he might not have meant anything. Taken on their own, or to describe each incident separately, particularly while in the middle of it, might not seem, once relayed, to be all that much at all. So it's clever, that, isn't it?
Yes. And that's exactly how the milkman operates.
Yes.
And for her, walking is a freedom. Reading while walking, running, and the milkman appears at these moments when she's walking and running, and he wants to encroach on those moments, particularly by getting her into a car. And that is a line she will not cross until late in the novel. And yes, maybe boyfriend loves cars, but, not getting inside one with the milkman, I don't think. So the stalking, though, is also from the community, from the gossip, the following, the social policing. Yeah. There's also stalking from the state. There's this clicking. So often when they're walking along out of a bush, it's always a bush. There's a sound of a click. And they all know that there's a state photographer, as in a British photographer, so taking some random pictures, which they just completely ignore.
There's a sense that everyone's being stalked, or certainly, the central character is being stalked all the time, as you say, by everyone, because they're all watching her, they're all talking about her, they're all passing judgment on her. And as you say, it's only by running or walking and reading that she feels she can get away from that. And going back earlier to what you said about no violence in the book, clearly there was a huge amount of violence going on all the time, all around her. And yet it's almost like she chooses not to see it, like she sort of chooses to block it all out by these ways, because the whole thing is filtered through her consciousness.
Yes.
We don't see it either.
Yeah. And there's some horrendous remembered violence and what have you, but yes, exactly that. And maybe that is her trauma, filtering it out, as you say. Yep. But that stalking by the state, by the community, by everyone following and monitoring everyone else is something they're all aware of. So Longest Friend, who the maybe heroine meets with when just before she gets poisoned, says,
We should explain longest friend is her oldest friend.
our oldest friend.
And there'd been a whole category of other friends who were sort of not quite so longest friend and quite new friends, and they'd all sort of completely disappeared, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And longest
friend doesn't turn out to be that great a friend.
No, she doesn't.
But, hey ho. With all their monitoring, this is longest friend, she went on, they're infiltrating, they're intercepting, listening at posts, drawing up of room layouts, of position of furniture, of ornament placement, of wallpaper, of watch lists, and geo-profiling, cutting feeds and feeding feeds, and mother goose and divination by tea leaves, and not least, she said, with their helicopters flying over an alienated, cynical, existentially bitter landscape. That's not untypical of the probes, is it? It's sort of, it kind of escalates, it wanders.
Yeah.
The division of the Belfast communities is entrenched. There's an absolute separation that's omnipresent. And it reminds me, I don't know have you been to Belfast, Rui?
Well, I was born there, actually.
I know you were born there. Have you been since?
But I've never been since.
So you can go on tours. I went on a bus tour of the communities. And there are, anyone who's been there would have seen this. There are these murals of men in balaclavas with guns and bombs in their hand. And it's still all there, it's still all flagged up and lined up. And it's really quite an intense feeling, even today. And she also captures a kind of political lexicon. So there's partisan, terrorist, military intelligence, but there's no place or group or religion or known political person named. The Troubles are not named. So we're given this sense of it all without it being actually physically named.
Yes, and it's clever because you know exactly what's going on. You know who the renouncers are. You know they're the IRA. You know who the state security police are. It's the British Army. But they're not named, and it creates a sense of, it's almost quite claustrophobic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very intense. It's very, very repressive.
Yeah, it really is. And we talked about walking and running being a form of protest, reading as well. So she reads Martin Chuzzlewit, Ivanhoe, Jane Eyre, and then there's a redefining in the novel of political rights and wrongs. So what's beyond the pale, which historically beyond the pale is a name that the Protestants gave for the barbarian Catholic community out beyond the sort of the Anglo-British civilized bit of Ireland.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That is now a phrase that's applied by Anna Burns to those the Catholic community decides it dislikes. So the bullied, historically bullied, have become those who now put others beyond the pale.
But lots of characters beyond the pale. The almost heroine becomes beyond the pale at times, doesn't she? Because she walks along reading a book. That's thought to be beyond the pale.
Yeah, absolutely. She's told she's beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the totalitarian tag that Anna Burton raises at the start of the novel, because the British state, it doesn't seem present. It's rarely there. The abuse of power is exercised by the renouncer males. And the main check on this comes from the women.
It's such a good point. It's like there's no state control at all, really. There's no government where they are, other than the renouncers, who are these sort of slightly shady male, apparently terrorists, but they're thugs, really.
Yeah.
And then the women are the counter. Yeah.
Then the males sort of set up these mechanisms to sort of, be all official and what have you. So they set up a kind of kangaroo court to try somebody McSomebody for assaulting the maybe heroine, the narrator. And, the style kind of captures just the seriousness and wit with which the novel kind of deals with issues. So somebody piped up, we're told, with the charge of 1/4 rape. And that was what they did. And then goes on, women's issues were baffling, demanding, awful, bloody annoying. But coming up with the invention of rape with subsections, meaning that in our district, there could now be full rape, 3/4 rape, half rape, or 1/4 rape, which our announcers said was better than rape divided by 2, as in rape and not rape, which they added were the acceptable categories in most fiefdoms, as well as in the burlesque courts of the occupiers. Yeah, and then it goes on. And it's that sense of, this is something that's complex, that's, an irresolvable difficulty is that issue of, what should we define as rape? But
Yes.
she sort of dissolves it all in the rush of the syntax. And women, Rue, were, actually historically in Northern Ireland did have a political significance.
Well, they sure did, yes. And in this book, at one point, there is a rise of the women's movement, and it takes several forms, but it's driven essentially by local women who, as you say, are trying to impose order and control things and possibly a political movement for peace. And they're called women, they're called issue women. They're kind of, they seem to be outsiders who come in, who are more politicized individuals who want to, I wouldn't say hijack the movement, but get involved and project it onto a bigger stage and maybe try and create a wider women's movement for peace in Northern Ireland. And of course, this is exactly what happened in the 1970s. There was a peace movement led by two women called Marriott Conaghan and Betty Williams. And it had a huge influence, a huge impact, and they won the Nobel Peace Prize. It didn't in the end stop the violence, but they were very influential for quite a while.
And that's very much, I think, what the women in the novel they hold the power. Absolutely. So the penultimate scene has wee sisters, that's the three wee sisters, dancing in the streets. Yeah. And that's a massive counteraction to the kind of repressive intent of all the men. And in terms of division, at the end, the narrator, the maybe heroine, jumps the hedge. And her, I forget which one it is by the end, second brother, they rise above the hedge. It's tiny. It's a barrier. It's not a problem. And yes. I think there's something symbolically, that's the last scene in the novel, symbolically about the smallness when we really see them in perspective. Yes. The barriers that separate us.
With one bound, they were free almost.
With one bound, they were free. And the fun of the prose, humour, intelligence, playfulness, I think that is also a protest. Like watching a sunset, placing beauty and joy in a dark place is a kind of defiance. And the freedom of the prose is unruly. It's an outflow of identity. And it lifts us. It has a magical tone that lifts us. And I think the novel, for me, Rue, it's a superb example of how satire and humour are a perfect way to engage with dystopian political and social situations and become a means of addressing, but also rising above the horror of the Troubles. The final word of the novel is laugh, which is like an expression of identity and freedom.
Yes, I nearly laughed or something, isn't it? Yes, that's right. But you mentioned the sunset. At various points in the book, you get these sort of quite sudden and random connections to a world of art, of literature, of higher learning, of intellectual activity. And at one point, the heroine, the almost heroine, goes to French lessons, I think, doesn't she? And she studies French literature. And that's where the French teacher makes them look at a sunset. And she realizes, the sky, she thinks the skies can only be blue or grey, but actually it turns out it can be any colour you want. And I think we'll come on to the wee sisters and what they talk about later on, but the literature that almost heroine is reading throughout the book is another part of this. So outside this claustrophobic, nightmarish world that she's got caught up in where everyone's watching her, these are her ways of trying to strive for something better.
So we talked about stalking, but is it even about stalking, really? Because the milkman appears at the start, and he's very threatening and ominous. There are 3 appearances in the first half of the novel, which don't take up that much in terms of space of the actual prose itself, and there are long digressions in the middle of those appearances. So you feel there are sort of delaying tactics when you're reading it. You think what she's doing here is, this milkman's she's just kind of playing with us, and the second half of the novel is going to be an absolute terror fest of a bit like the film Gaslighting, where it just gets full on scary and oppressive. And around halfway through the novel, there's a high focus on the maybe heroine's state of mind. She withdraws from others, and then there's this sort of 2-chapter long digression. There's a long one about poisoning, where the narrative gets quite surreal. with Tablet's girl poisoning the narrator. And then there's a long chapter about the difficulty of unrequited love, followed by the fourth appearance of the milkman. And then he dies.
Yeah.
And then you get the last 60 pages of the novel, which are not about the milkman at all. He barely features. What they are about is this
another character,
the real milkman.
The real milkman.
And he's just a decent guy who actually is a milkman. He's called the real milkman because unlike Milkman, whose name is just Milkman, this man is indeed a milkman. So you get these playful digressions. You get this sort of spiraling back and forth. So like you said, she tells us she's watched a sunset with maybe boyfriend. The narrative goes kind of walkabout. He revisits the sunset 2 or 3 times, such as through that French lesson. You sense you've had the actual sunset episode. You're not sure if it's done yet. Real milkman will pick her up. And then suddenly, just as you're about to find it quite sort of scary, there's a long digression of women breaking curfew, the rise of the feminist group we talked about. And then she says, that's why I kept quiet in the lorry with real milkman, listening politely until he came to the end of his words. You know, and you suddenly realize, I'm back here in this place with real milkman when she's just picked up the dead cat and she's been scared by the actual milkman, the stalking milkman. So it's got this kind of spiraling backwards and forwards, and it does pull the reader into a kind of vortex. But equally, it's got the effect of taking the focus away from the stalking. She's having a terrible time with the milkman, but then you get 70 pages of walkabout, and it relieves the oppressive tone. But also, it's got to make you ask, well, why is she doing that? If she wants to scare us about predatory males, that seems an odd way of doing it. And I think in terms of the real subject of the novel, it's actually about the real milkman, which is a narrative of authentic passion, courage, kindness. And initially, when you meet the real milkman, you think it's just one more kind of comic trope.
Yeah.
But he actually takes over the milkman's role. He's more successful at what the milkman's trying to do, which is get women to, like you and get into the car with you and stuff like that.
What turns out with real milkman, we should say, is towards the end of the book, he gets shot himself.
Yes.
And
in hospital.
He gets taken into hospital. At this point, it turns out that a whole host of women who have really been in love with him all along, including almost heroine's mother, who's called Ma, pile into hospital to try and tend him, and they basically throw themselves at him.
They throw themselves at him.
Yeah, and this includes all the pious women who turn out, as we said earlier, not to be quite so pious. So real milkman in the end becomes the hero of the book.
I'm going to read an extract that describes what you just talked about there, about the pious women. So, some of these women discovered that while they were in chapel, eyes closed, hands clasped, wearing out the pew with piety, invocations and kneecaps, others had taken advantage of their fervent, protracted devotions temporarily to minimize their own devotions, to rush out to the hospital to see the real milkman first. Upon this discovery, everyone became in a hurry. Prayers, when they happened on the hop. The ex-pious women apologized beforehand to God, assuring him that, of course, this was provisional, that it was only ever going to be provisional. Soon they'd get back to full-on, normal, formal praying, but in the meantime, if it was all right with him, they'd foreshorten and abridge all the items on the prayer listing, and off it goes. It goes on and on and on and on and on. But love in the novel, because that's what you described there, about Ma. Ma has an unrequited love for real milkman and has had all of her life, even though she's married to the maybe heroine's father.
But several characters marry the wrong person, don't they?
Yeah. So there's Peggy, who also loves the real milkman. There's Tablet Girl's sister, who has had an unrequited love affair with third brother.
Yes.
There's maybe boyfriend with Chef, because they're gay. They've not been able to make their love work. And everyone seems to be settling for somebody they don't love because they can't or won't have the love that they really desire. And maybe heroine realizes her feelings for maybe boyfriend aren't fully returned. And chillingly, that's the point when she pretty much feels, well, you never get the person you love. Yeah. So I might as well get in the car with real milkman. There's actually a name for this in the novel. It's called the wrong spouse issue. And it's really a sign of how relationships are so disjointed in a dysfunctional society. But equally, perhaps that's just how people survive.
There's a couple more things we should talk about, Charlie. One is madness, and the other is family, I think. But let's have a chat about madness first, because several of the characters are clearly not quite all there, and they're mentally ill, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, it's what Mark calls the psychologicals.
Yes.
And in the face of Dar, that's her father's, as in the maybe heroine's father's extreme mental illness, and then there's Tablets Girl,
Yeah.
and then there's the narrator herself who has depression.
Yeah.
Madness is a theme, and perhaps the city is mad. It seems completely and utterly insane.
Yes.
And the style both describes, but it also kind of in itself represents a kind of obsessive neurosis, such as through the listing. And this is the narrator describing Mars talking about her father, about the narrator's father. She meant depressions, for Dar had them. Big, massive, scudding, whopping, black cloud, infectious, crow, raven, jackdaw, coffin upon coffin, catacomb upon catacombs, skeletons upon skulls, upon bones, crawling along the ground to the grave type of depressions.
Yes, and that is contrasted, isn't it, with the way that Ma looks at life, where it's kind of, it could be worse, count your blessings, keep going, it's all going to be fine. And there's one point when almost heroine says, do you know what, I think my father might have been right.
Yeah.
But she does keep going. She does keep going.
Yeah. And Ma says, you have an attraction for the shadows as your Dar did.
Yes, exactly.
To the maybe heroine. It's clear that maybe heroine has struggled previously with depression, and those depressive traits are then heightened by being stalked. And the reading, I think, could be seen as an attempt just to block out the madness of Belfast. And there's this one memory, which is a memory of dogs being butchered. And she's just had to suppress that in order to survive, because it's so horrendous and horrific. And to some degree, it becomes a narrative, I think, about, the inner world when the outside world is unsafe. And she says, so shiny, because she talks about Tablets Girl's sister as being shiny. Shiny was bad, and too sad was bad, and too joyous was bad, which meant you had to go around not being anything, also not thinking, at least not at top level, which is why everybody kept their private thoughts safe and sound in those recesses underneath. So the narrator has strong views about, and she's got ethics, and she's got this sort of ditzy stream of consciousness voice. But when meeting paramilitary groupies, that's a kind of group of women. There are several sort of distinct groups, and these are the groupies who are sexualized to the hilt. She asks herself if she can't be allowed to enjoy the sexual innocence of an 18-year-old, and she is steely underneath. And she talks about her silence being her last power in this disempowering world.
Yes.
And even though, she is borderline mad herself, the ending, I think, it reminds us of her emotional intelligence, her maturity, because in some ways she is like a child. She's got a completely naive understanding of maybe boyfriend. The fact she picks up a dead cat's head to bury it, that's a kind of childlike thing to do in some ways.
It is. Yeah.
And the whole Tablets Girl sequence has a kind of, I suppose, dark fairy tale, kind of make-believe aspect to it.
Yeah, that bit I found really odd. It didn't really work for me. I wasn't quite sure what was going on. So what happens is this girl, she's called Tablets Girl, and she goes into clubs and she tries to poison people. And I'm not sure if she's actually killed anyone, but she certainly has tried to kill people. And at one point she poisons the almost heroine, who does in the end recover. But it is because... let me get this right. It's because that Milkman, who's still alive at this point, thinks that she has tried to poison this girl who he wants to go out with. He's been stalking. That he kills her. He kills her brother.
He kills Tablets Girl.
He kills Tablets Girl. Yeah. He goes and kills her. That's right. And at this point, the whole community kind of start treating the heroine, this 18-year-old girl, as if she was the partner of this incredibly powerful man. So she goes into shops and she doesn't have to pay. They sort of look away when she walks through. She is very well described. She feels quite uncomfortable about the whole thing, I think.
And you know, she goes to this dark place, dark night of the soul, I suppose. But at the end of the novel, she's running again. She's engaged fully with her family, including her mother. The novel ends with her looking towards happiness. It's about going back to normal, running with third brother-in-law, third sister getting drunk with her friends. The final sentences of the novel are soft. They're delicate. She's been stalked, poisoned to the point of death, beaten up by a second stalker, and yet life resumes and she can go running again, which is a sign of freedom.
Yep.
It's also a novel about family, about a massive dysfunctional family, but held together by this strongest and most primal tie, the family bond. And third sister, the novel ends with third sister kissing her husband. They're completely nothing in common whatsoever, a terrible marriage, kissing her husband affectionately at the end. It's one of the last acts of the novel.
But it's always a cliche that Catholics have big families, but in this book, there are many big families, and many of them have been decimated by the Troubles, by death. And you get these sort of shocking sequences where it's quite hard to work out who's related to who because they don't have names, they don't have surnames. You suddenly find out that someone is actually someone else's brother or sister. And then you find out, there were 9 of them and now there are 3 left or something. And it's told in a rather matter-of-fact way. He got taken out by the renouncers and he got blown up by the security forces and he committed suicide. And somebody McSomebody, he's in a large family. And I think sort of 5 or 6 of them have been killed at some point.
That's the kind of detail that's so hard to keep track of during the novel because like this swirl of information about.
So somebody McSomebody, he had a brother called Nuclear Boy, and he was always going on. He was worried about nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
He was worried about the arms race, completely separate to the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And he commits suicide. Nuclear Boy sees his brother being shot in the street by the army. And these are both siblings of somebody McSomebody.
Right. Good knowledge. Well done. I mean, it's hard enough to keep track of the narrator's own family. There's first to fourth brother and various partners. There's first to fourth sister. First to fourth brothers-in-law who are married to first to fourth sister. There's 3 wee sisters and there's more. Narrator is middle sister. It's a massive chaotic clan. It's nigh on impossible to keep track of which sister or brother-in-law has done what act of renouncing, which has had which dysfunctional relationship. Indeed, are they alive? Are they dead? Are they living over the water or whatever? Yeah. And to me, that's just part of the kind of swirling confusion of the prose in the novel.
Yeah. At one point, the narrator says, and you've no idea this is the case, but about a third of the way through the book, she says, I'd had 2 brothers in the renouncers myself. In other words, 2 of her brothers have been in the IRA.
Yeah. Which again, it's a glimpse into that world that she doesn't want to go there to. She just
absolutely
doesn't want us to really think about, or she doesn't want to think about. Ma's a powerhouse. She's a borderline mad Irish mother, except, she's probably slightly less mad than the pious women who she hangs out with. At her worst, she calls the maybe heroine a liar when the maybe heroine tries to disclose that the milkman is stalking her. And that's not good. And she continues her endless rant about the narrator needing to, just for the love of God, find a husband so she can be respectable in the eyes of the community.
Exactly, yeah.
But at best, Ma softens and her maternal instincts kick in when maybe heroine gets poisoned by Tablets Girl. And actually her own, as in Ma's own heartbreak, becomes apparent as the novel reaches its close and her own romantic desires at the end become the novel's main focus.
It's really well done, that. And you sort of suddenly realise you're looking at a real person with real emotions and real desires, rather than someone who's hiding everything like as they've all been doing through most of the novel.
And then, as promised, there's the wee sisters, age 7, 8, and 9, precociously brilliant. So they have knowledge of, and I quote, social anthropology, mathematics, politics, chemistry, the intestinal tract, unusual euphemisms, double-entry bookkeeping, the 3 divisions of the psyche, the Hebrew alphabet, Russian nihilism, Asian cattle, 12th century Chinese porcelain, the Japanese unit, Demosthenes, disapproval of Alcibiades, the thesis, Francis Bacon, really being William Shakespeare. Deep breath. And the family basically aware of this kind of precocious brilliance, they come in on the wee sisters reading newspapers, and these newspapers are from over the water, and they say, "What are you doing, wee sisters, reading these newspapers? Where did you get them?" "Hush, older sisters," they said. "We're busy. We're trying to understand their viewpoint." After that, they returned to poring over their broadsheets and tabloids, while we, their elder sisters, disbelievingly looked on. Then we looked at each other, me, third sister, second sister, and first sister, trying to understand their viewpoint. What obscurity would we sisters utter next?
I love that. That's my favourite bit in the book.
Yeah,
It's
it's gorgeous.
Trying to understand their viewpoint.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And actually, that's what everyone should be doing, for goodness sake, but of course aren't.
Yeah.
But at the end of the novel, the wee sisters are doing what girls under 10 probably should be doing, which is dressing up in sequins and tiaras as ballerinas, and they go dancing in the street. And it would be overstating it to say the family's unified and normal, but there is a sense of bonds, family bonds, that allow the narrator and the wee sisters to enjoy being their age, being who they are and being who they should be.
I agree. On the dancing and the ballerinas, we should also say that it's maybe boyfriend's parents, isn't it? Yeah. So it's complete a weird and bizarre detail in the book. So maybe boyfriend was obviously part of a larger family. And what we're told is that his two parents, who were sort of ballroom dancers, one day decided to just leave their family, their little children behind, and go off and seek a career as international ballroom dancers. And they had done this, and they become world famous. And so we keep seeing them on television, and they become role models for all these children in the streets of Belfast. And as you described, they dress up as ballerinas and go dancing in the streets. It's a rather charming detail. I wonder if that's based on any truth, if there was any story.
When I read it, I wasn't sure. I wonder if ballroom dancing it's quite a sort of conservative community in Northern Ireland. Would that be fair to say? It's quite religious. So I wonder if ballroom dancing is a sort of a bigger thing there. Don't want to generalise. Sorry if I'm insulting anyone in Northern Ireland.
Anyway, it's a lovely thing. Good. Well, we've hopefully brought out some of the things that you'll find if you read this book. It is it's an extraordinary book, actually. It really is. It's a tour de force. All told, as all this stuff is told through the consciousness, the narration of this one girl, which is non-stop from start to finish. And through it, you learn all these things, and you get a real sense of what it might have been like, as we said at the start, to have been there and to have been 18 years old at that time and tried to live a normal life and read books and, fall in love. Quite hard. But what do you think, Charlie? What's your sort of summary of the book?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I've read it twice now, and what I love is the style. The writing style, especially the second time I read it, I just felt like I buried myself in the voice, the narrative voice, and the style, and it's incredibly witty. For example, the female genitalia is called the monosyllable, and it's full of just funny, witty, great jokes everywhere. But more generally, the style lifts the novel out of its dark context. And what could be darker or more forbidding than a novel about stalking during 1970s troubles in Belfast?
Yeah.
But to me, it doesn't feel like that. Not at all. Instead, to me, it's about love, finding humor and meaning in dark places, and particularly how family bonds overcome evil.
Yeah. So, yes, it's the third of the four we're doing in this sequence. And we chose them quite randomly, but it's quite curious, isn't it? They are, all four are, kind of historical novels.
Political historical novels.
Historical novels of one sort or another. 3 out of the 4 are ghost stories, have ghosts. This is the only one that doesn't.
Right.
We'll come back to Lincoln.
A ghost story. I hadn't realised about Wolfhall until you went through that so beautifully last time. Yeah.
Well, it's not. Wolfhall's not a ghost story.
No, but it is in a way.
In a way, it is.
In a way.
Yeah. This one definitely is not.
Yeah.
And Lincoln and the Bardo is sort of bonkers ghost. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Come back to that next time. I think we sort of need to, have a try and pin our colours to the mast when we talk about these books and have some sort of view and maybe some sort of ranking system. And I know we've got some ideas on that, Charlie, haven't we? So I think we'll be telling our listeners about how we're going to do that very shortly.
I think once we've done this little series on Bookery, we should start a rating scale, and I think what we should do is go back to all the books we've done so far and mark them.
Yeah, well, okay.
But I'm going to put my cards to the mask a bit here. So I'm putting this novel above the two we've done so far. For me, I don't know whether you'd do that with Wolf Hall, but I would be having this is above Seven Moons.
Yeah.
Seven Moons is above Wolf Hall for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I am pretty sure, having reread it for an upcoming podcast, that Lincoln in the Bardo for me is going to be above all of those.
Is it?
I think so.
That's so interesting. Okay, well,
what about you? You pin your colours to the mast, Rupert.
I'm still formulating my feelings about Lincoln in the Bardo. It's such an extraordinary one-off novel that will.
What about this one? Where would you put this one compared to the others that we've done?
I think probably above Seven Moons. I think Seven Moons is a wonderful book. It's so chaotic and freewheeling, and
I think so.
I think it sort of loses control at times. Wolf Hall, I think Wolf Hall is such a seminal, great book. It really is. Maybe it's sort of more. It's more directly connected to the history, which I know you didn't like, and this one is more. It comes out of left field on the history, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, to be continued.
To be continued.
Good. Okay, Charlie. Well, that was great. Well done. You guided us through that magnificently, and we'll be back very shortly, everyone, with our final novel in this series, which is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. So we'll see you very soon for that. Bye.